and we are back, NIO Live. For all those live streamers out there, if you would like to send a question for Josh Tijerina or Amy Harrison, you can do so by using the chat function, and we will relay those over to her. But I want to go ahead and start with Mr. Joshua. So, Josh, we've known each other for quite some time now, haven't we? Right? And you're a marketing guy, and I'm a fundraising guy. Now, do you remember the first time we met?
I do, yeah.
Okay. So we were hired to do something at the organization he worked at, and it was this whole fundraising on it. We came in, we're doing our whole presentation. It was like 4 hours. And Josh just sat there, and I don't think you ever looked up from your laptop. I don't think we ever had our eyes meet. Is that true?
No.
Yeah. So what was that all about, Mr. Branding marketing guy versus fundraising?
I just feel like you're just putting me on the spot. But
that's exactly what I'm doing.
No, you know what it was for me as a marketer, and this was before having an understanding of the symbiotic relationship between marketing and development and programs, which actually I don't see a difference between any of those now. Mm-hmm. Like those all are blurred lines for me now. But originally as a marketer, we'd have consultants and people come in all the time. And it seemed, I was just like, this is the same spiel, whatever, And I remember sitting there, and it was some of the work that you had done that sort of caught my eye almost, I think, towards the end, right? Like it was towards the end. And I looked up and I was like, oh, that's you. And so you, because it was really good marketing, my eye sort of jumped up and I got really excited about working with you. And I think that it was one of the core, like the fundamental disconnects of any nonprofit that still really exists is that there's marketing and then there's fundraising. And
never the two shall meet.
Yeah, right. And they actually, like, especially in the organization I worked for, it was like a really like a hate-hate relationship. And it was like, get out of my turf, and we had to define roles. I can't remember, I can tell you so many meetings of like sitting there and saying, we need to define roles, which is really just sort of like an anti-way of working together and connecting in order to drive a result.
And well, I'm glad we were able to turn the corner because you were actually the guy who hired us in the end. So
that's right.
We appreciate that, Josh. So, Amy, I want to talk to you. So I know that you've spent most of your career doing commercial copywriting, right? Which is, classic kind of marketing type of stuff. And now you find yourself becoming like deeper and deeper ensnared in our nonprofit web. So what's up with that? Why do you keep coming back?
You guys just keep pulling me in. Like there is no escape, and you get me on the stage here and you make me promise to do things, and I can't say no to the camera. So no, what I love is the ferocity with which you guys are ambitious in your marketing, and I love that. I love that drive. I love that you have the same drive that I have for I want to make sales for my clients. I do, but in the commercial space, I want to match the perfect person to the perfect product. Mm-hmm. So I'm very aggressive and ambitious with my sales, but it's not a case of, I just want to sell anything to anyone, because that's a con man. And I see the same ethos with Next After. You've got that drive to match the perfect person to the perfect organization, and in a way that they get something from it. So they love the updates that they're getting. They love finding out how their donation is helping to facilitate a much bigger change in the world. And yeah, I love that. I love that sort of aggressive drive and the real cuddly feely, let's change the world stuff as well.
Well, we're glad you keep coming back, and we appreciate that. Now, Josh, you are a writer as well, right? And so let me ask you, like from Amy's talk, like she talked about a couple of different types of techniques you can use. I mean, you can use symptomatic copy that explains symptoms. You can like talk about addressing the problem. I keep losing this iPad. You can talk about like how, what were some of the other ones, Amy? I'm sorry, I'm blanking out here.
So yeah, looking at using symptoms to make it a problem pop out, to show that here are your warning signs, but showing that you can't ignore those warning signs because there is a cost of doing nothing. And then something that I call butterfly moments, for showing that there's that pivotal moment where something big has changed, and then
the light bulb goes off, and all of a sudden people get it. Right.
And then using curiosity, but understanding how curiosity works so that you can use it well.
No clickbait, man. Clickbait's bad. But like when you write, like how do you think about like approaching a persuasive piece that you put together? I mean, what are some techniques that you use that maybe are different than what Amy uses?
So when I'm looking through, and I really like the concept of like paradigms and funnels, which is really hard to do digitally because people take in like little bits of content. And so you sort of have to do it all the time and do it on all these different places. Email, though, allows for your ability to sort of tell a story through multiple pieces. And if you can get people to open it with really good subject lines, then you get to tell a full story. And really where I start that paradigm is in value proposition. Like that is fundamental to me. In the talk I talked about identity and defining who you are and defining who your organization is and what you do. Really where that mission meets your value proposition is so key for me. So I like to start with that story. And then I will use a lot of different techniques. Like for some, and also the other thing I always try to tell myself, which I think with any writer or anybody kind of putting out content, what works doesn't always work. And so I've got to really be open to like, if something works, I get stuff wrong all the time. I'll tell you, I was on a walk with my wife just literally like 3 days ago. And I have this idea for this organization, and I give 3 different like concepts. One is this really powerful story, and it's about like feeding hungry children. And it was like one was this really powerful story, and one was their value proposition, and the other one was stats. And I thought the story for sure, like she's gonna eat that up. And she's like, oh, the stats, I wanna know my money's went to something. And I was like, wow, it's exactly the last one I thought you would go with. So sometimes for some people that works. And I think that when you look at a project or you look at communicating, that you really have to look at all the different platforms and tell that story in a lot of different ways because people just fundamentally take in information in different ways.
Right.
And so there's no like silver bullet. And so you just have to be really an artist and keep telling the story.
Yeah, so let me put a pin in that. So like Josh talked a lot about value exchange, and a value exchange means that there has to be 2 parties at least involved, right? And so that other party for us is a donor. For you, it may be a customer. But you have to understand who those people are, what they care about, and why they would say yes to you. So Amy, tell me, what are some things you do to start to research customers and just try to understand and get inside their head a little bit, because that's the hardest thing to do, I think, sometimes.
It is very difficult, and it depends what you have at your disposal. So some of my clients have a very big audience, and we will do surveys. We'll do a lot of surveys. So ahead of one launch, we did a survey about, tell us the challenge that this particular product would solve. We had around 2,000 responses, and I will read them all, and I want it in free form text of just tell me your biggest challenge in solving this problem. Surveys are great. If you're doing a survey, you want to, as much as possible, have it free form text so that they can answer the questions in their own words, because what you're looking for is those little nuances of language, how you want to repeat to them how they talk about the problem, so how they talk about the challenges. If you can talk to people, I mean, every organization at least has a customer or previous donors that they could probably reach out to. And for those people, I would say, if you can get on the phone with someone and again, record it, hear the way that they talk, look for those little passion spikes as well. When they're getting emotive and animated about why they support your organization. And you want those questions is, what made you support us? What frustrated you? What problem did you see that you would like to disappear? And you will get so much content that you can pick up, tweak a little bit, put out. And it makes a big difference between someone who reads it and says, they sound like they're talking to me and they understand me and they have empathy, as opposed to, oh, here's some phrases that I could pick up and put in any organization and it all sounds the same.
See, that's sometimes the key difference, right? When you can actually frame, as Josh says, the value proposition, but in words that the donor themselves use and understand, then all of a sudden you have butterfly moments, right? Like
Absolutely.
You have this opportunity for people to connect because they can get it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really one of the hardest things to do, because we come and approach our value proposition from our organizational centric point of view. And the donor's approaching it from completely different aspect. And so we're oftentimes kind of missing each other in the crossfire there. Now, Josh, I know that you do a lot of kind of like testing and research, and you do some stuff with like social media. So how might you use like social media and some of the things you can do there to try to understand and learn about the people that would be your ideal supporters, like what they care about? What are some things that you do?
Yeah, so this is actually like one of the core things that I think about, like finding your audience. I love finding the audience through social media. Like it's because it's just data rich. And and sometimes social media can be a little bit off or whatever, like you don't get exactly what you're looking for. But like I love doing that type of thing and running those tests. You can test different messages. You can find all these different audiences, and really discovering audiences that you didn't know, you didn't think about before, that you can really like dive into. And this is where I think one of the core things we're talking about marketing and fundraising and the sort of disconnect between those two is where I think marketing really can take advantage and help fundraising is what they might call soft KPIs, but the reality is like that is audience building. And you learn so much about your audience within those like quote unquote soft KPIs. They're funnel builders. Like marketing should be fundamentally building the audience in the funnel that fundraising closes, where fundraising comes in, marketing builds that trust, and then fundraising comes in and endorses that value exchange. And so that for me, like with social media, that's what I love to do there is audience build, testing different messages, engaging different audiences, and really starting to build that funnel that now that I've got this audience, I can start to lead them right into fundraising. And that for me just seems like a really natural transition in a relationship between an organization and a donor.
Excellent. So I want to shift gears a little bit. And Amy, I want to come back to you just related to copyright. So you're a professional copywriter. I mean, this is what you do. Hey, this is what I do. Hey, I write copy. So I have an opinion that marketers shouldn't have to always hire people like you to write copy, but they should learn how to do these things themselves. Or even salespeople, because oftentimes they're the ones that are closest to the customers themselves, right? So in our world, that would be like donor reps. And too often than not, I often see that it's always like, it almost like feels like, when I first started in fundraising, I felt like I was not allowed to write copy. Like I was not qualified to write copy. That it was like some sort of like very like mysterious and like powerful dark magic that only like, you know, those who have been trained in the dark arts would be able to do, right? And so I felt very gun shy to engage in that. But when I started, you know, like learning more about like really the things that work are oftentimes not like overly composed, if you will, right? It's about like just trying to communicate clearly, like you're talking about clarity today. So give me your opinion on that. Now I'm putting you on the spot a little bit because this is your livelihood, but you know, tell me what your thoughts are about that.
No, there's a couple of really interesting things there, and yeah, copywriting can be seen as this dark art, and some people, you know, sort of approach you and think, hey, you know, just write us that magic headline, you know, here's some information, but the people in your organization, the marketers, the sales rep, particularly the sales reps, that is where they are having those direct conversations, quite often just those casual face-to-face conversations, but they are getting a ton of information. And I would say that the majority of copywriting is research. The majority of copywriting, it's not the fancy techniques and the clever little wordplay. It is about going and speaking to these sales reps and saying, tell me the conversations that you're having. Where are the sticking points? What do you say when suddenly they light up and they get it? And I will take that and put that into words. The more research you do, the less fancy magic you need to do. And I think the tricky thing is that when we sit down to write copy, we're not facing anyone.
Right.
And we're not getting that instant reaction. I've got so much respect for people who are doing face-to-face sales because they're constantly getting this feedback loop of that didn't land the mark, their eyes are glazing over, oh, I've got them, okay, so what was it, let's feed it there. You don't have that when you're trying to sit down and write a donation page from start to finish. But if you have an idea of what sort of language and what kind of points work, then you're going to be more likely to hit those points on the page.
Interesting. Josh, do you have an opinion on the matter?
So, one, I agree 100% on the research. Like the research is like so fundamental to it, and I think that like a lot of times people will sit down and they either think they know, and that's like the biggest mistake in the world. Like I've written like copy that really worked, and then I will try it again, and it just misfires like worse than anything I've ever done. So I always sit down with this idea of I don't really know what's going to work, and I have to do the research in order to find it. I also have like this term. Now I remember we were at lunch one time in Dallas, and I said this, and we got into a very heated debate. So I bring this up, and I say that, and for my agency, we have this idea where we say we start with art and we optimize. And what that really means is that I look at, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, which is a pretty good movie. Great. And they're in this office with this record guy, and they're arguing for this like 6.5 minute Bohemian Rhapsody song. And he's like, that's never going to work. And yet it does work. Like it works for generations, right? And the thing is that like fundamentally they knew who they were. They really believed in the art that they were making, and they got it out there. I think that as marketers, as fundraisers, I really like the idea of starting with art, going to your core of what you believe, and being vulnerable and throwing it out there, and then optimizing, like figuring out what bit of that worked. And yeah, maybe it feels a little bit dangerous. Vulnerability always does. Like I just read this thing the other day, and every success feels like a threat, right? Like, because that's being vulnerable. So get your art out there, your value proposition, how you're going to change the world, and then start to optimize. Find the right audience, and just really just get it out there.
It's the merger of art and science, isn't it?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you mentioned vulnerability, and actually that was where I wanted to go next. What happens when you screw up? And I'm going to share a little story to kind of set this part of the topic up. So it was actually, we're kind of known for our highly personal emails, and we spend a lot of time trying to figure out like how we can make sure to answer every single one of those emails that go out. Well, there was an email that went out from me, and there was a technical snag. Instead of getting rid of dear first name, it said, "Dear first name, can I just ask you a quick question? Like, well, what's holding you back from coming to the conference? Blah, blah, blah. Let me know. I'd love to help." Which would have sounded like a very true, authentic, everything that we're talking about today. But it wasn't. And we screwed up, and we got flooded with so many replies. And, some people were snarky initially. But we responded to everyone. We're just like, "Oh yeah, totally blew it. Messed up. So sorry." And we got like such a tremendous outpouring of goodwill and like, "Oh man, I've done it too. It's cool." So there's a vulnerability and there's a risk of kind of leaning into mistakes when you mess up with copy, with words, and unfortunately, like digital, ink doesn't have an eraser. What would be your advice to folks? I mean, like, how do you deal with things when you make a mistake, when there's a typo in this mail piece that maybe is very precarious, or in the case of us, you have a technical issue that messes up an email or something? I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, I love that example because I get your emails, and the interesting thing was how you dealt with it is what caught my attention, because you sent a follow-up email, which I'd missed the previous email, and you sent a follow-up email, which was really, really well done, because it said, "Dear Amy, I think the subject line was about making a mistake." And so I'm always like, "Ooh, what did they do? What went wrong?" And then you open it up, and you had a great humor in it, because you then used my first name so many times to really make the point. It's like, "Dear Amy, we sent out an email and we didn't use your first name. I'm so sorry about that, Amy, because Amy's a lovely name, and why would you not want to hear?" And you responded well by being human and by being honest and using humor. And I think when you were saying there about showing that vulnerability, it's really showing about being human. I mean, it's the difference. We've all had those situations where, say, you get a bit of bad customer service. And sometimes we just want an apology. We don't want the manager to talk about the terms and conditions and everything. That's just going to make us angry. But if someone says, "I'm really sorry, we messed up, what can I do to put it right?" We're less likely probably to then say, "All right, I'm going to take you to the cleaners." And we're more likely to say, "Actually, I just needed to hear that. I just needed to hear that your intention is good and you made a mistake."
So our most coveted metric when it comes to email marketing is not opens or clicks or anything like that. It's responses. So by our book, that was our most successful email of all time. And it had 2 little word subject line: "I'm sorry." And we've had clients that have done stuff like that too for nonprofit stuff, and it works every single time. So for those of you watching on the live stream, just mess up every once in a while and send out an apology, and all will be right with the world. Josh, what do you think? How do you lean into mistakes?
Yeah, so I kind of look at this from 2 different ways. One, that example is awesome, because that's like one. If you said like, "What's the biggest mistake you've ever?" It's email, and it was a first name merge or whatever that they got wrong. The answer, because I think her answer was perfect. I think the answer from a personal standpoint of like, how do I as a marketer or fundraiser deal with that? And I would say that like there's really 2 ways to look at it. One, you have to learn from it, so you can't blow it off. But at the same time, like, you can't stop it from like moving forward. Like, you're going to make mistakes, so you just have to sort of accept it and just keep moving forward. Like, I think that like all the time we make these mistakes, and if you're a copywriter or you do social media, you're going to blow it. And so when I like hire somebody and I'm kind of working them through this, I say, "Look, here are the mistakes you're going to make. Like, it's just fundamentally true. Learn from it, like be serious about it for a minute, but don't let it injure you. Like, just keep moving forward, make the apology, or work with the client to figure out, because sometimes ignoring it is actually the best thing. Sometimes it's a really heartfelt apology, sometimes it's humor. Pick one, because it's a crapshoot, and go with it, and you'll be fine. It'll be fine.
All right, we've got about 60 seconds, so I'm going to give you a lightning round opportunity to answer one question. So, and this is our value proposition question. So for the folks that are watching on this live stream, why should they come to NIO Summit rather than some other conference or not at all? Please tell me.
Oh my God. For me, I mean, this is my 4th year, and I joke about it, but even if you didn't ask me back, I would be here waiting in the wings. It's not a conference. It is a spectacle. It's an event. But I have to say that it is one where when you walk through the door, you feel like it's family. So you have this wonderful experience of being treated to all the, the fun and the entertainment, but with people that you're going to really get to know well, who are interested in you, and you're going to form some really good bonds.
Awesome. Josh?
Value, first of all, that's a really easy answer, is that every talk you're going to get, you're going to have something tangible to walk away with and add value to what you're doing. The second thing is the attention to detail, the spectacle, as Amy said, was that, like, when I walk up and I see the banners out by the street, and I'm like, who got those banners? Like, it's just every little detail is so much fun, and are little Easter eggs, and it's just a little fun thing that you can engage in, that other conferences, they just overlook that. And I think that the fact that you pay attention to those details, you make it fun, and you deliver value, that's the best.
Well, for me, the greatest opportunity is being able to actually hear from people like you. So thank you both so much for being here with us. Thank you for doing this interview. And live streamers, we'll see you back in just a little bit.